While fishing by the riverbank, the man, who had spent most of his days alone since his wife passed away, was shocked to discover an animal floating on the water and drifting to the shore. It wasn't just any animal. Its light orange fur, ragged and wet, was barely visible against the gentle waves. It floated lazily, lifelessly. His heart skipped a beat. Without hesitation, he abandoned his fishing rod, his boots splashing into the icy water as he rushed to the shore. Reaching out with trembling hands, he pulled the small body from the water. It was a bobcat cub, its once mighty feline presence now reduced to fragile helplessness. Who knew how long it had been struggling in the river? The man bent down to check for signs of life. Its breathing was faint, almost imperceptible. His heart tightened, each shallow breath of the cub feeling like a thread connecting them both to life's fragility. Memories of losing his wife surged forward, like a tide he couldn't stop. The helplessness, the regret, the unanswered what-ifs. But listen to this. He wasn't going to let history repeat itself. Not this time. With trembling but determined hands, he began rescue movements. Pressing gently against the cub's chest, he whispered soft encouragement as though sheer will could revive the little creature. "Come on, little one," he murmured, his voice tight with emotion. "Stay with me. Don't give up." For an agonizing moment, there was nothing, just the gurgle of the river behind him and his own desperate breaths. And then a miracle, a tiny cough, weak but alive. Water trickled from the cub's mouth, and its eyes fluttered open, glazed and confused, but open. The man let out a ragged breath, his chest tightening with both relief and joy. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose igniting within him. But that's not all. The cub wasn't just an animal to him in that moment. It was hope, a second chance at saving something precious. He saw in its fragile form the same helplessness he had once felt, the same need for someone to care. Without another thought, he shrugged off his old coat, wrapping it tightly around the shivering creature. He held it close to his chest, letting his body warmth seep into its tiny frame. "You're going to be okay," he murmured, as much for himself as for the cub. The walk back to his small cabin at the edge of the woods was long and cold, but he didn't care. Each step felt like a promise, a vow to this small life he now carried. By the time he reached home, night had fallen, and the forest was eerily quiet, save for the distant call of an owl. The fire in the hearth crackled weakly as he pushed the door open, his breath misting in the frosty air. The familiar silence of his home greeted him, a place that had once echoed with laughter and the warmth of shared meals, but had since become a quiet refuge for one. He carefully set the cub down on the old armchair, its frame sagging with age and use. From a nearby shelf, he grabbed a soft blanket, worn but clean, and spread it out to create a makeshift bed. Kneeling by the chair, he brushed a damp strand of fur from its face, his calloused hand trembling slightly. "There you go," he whispered softly, his voice heavy with emotion. For a moment, he just sat there, watching the steady rise and fall of the cub's chest. The firelight danced across the room, casting shadows that seemed almost alive. Each flicker of light seemed to tell a story of resilience, echoing the trials he had faced and the hope he was now clutching to. The cub let out a faint sound, a mix between a sigh and a whimper, as if reassuring him of its presence. In the quiet of that moment, he felt something stir within him, a fragile but undeniable hope that maybe, just maybe, they could both find healing in each other. His thoughts drifted to his wife, her memory now less of a pain and more of a guiding light. "You would have loved this little one," he murmured aloud, his voice cracking slightly. The bobcat shifted slightly, its small body nestling into the warmth of the blanket. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes, as if the cub understood and accepted the love and care being offered. The man wiped his eyes, smiling faintly as he leaned back in his chair. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about finding a reason to live, to cherish, and to hope. But listen to this. It gets worse. The cub's condition was dire. It refused to eat, its breaths coming in shallow bursts. The man didn't sleep that night. He stayed by the chair, coaxing it to take small sips of warm milk he'd prepared. He whispered stories, fragments of his life, anything to fill the oppressive silence. "My wife, she used to say I had a knack for taking care of the little things," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Guess she'd laugh at me now, seeing me fuss over you." Days passed, and the cub began to recover. Its eyes, once dull and unfocused, started to shine with life. It would watch him intently as he moved around the cabin, its small body curled on the blanket he'd laid out. The man, for the first time in years, found himself smiling. But it wasn't just that. The cub's presence filled the emptiness he'd grown used to. It was a quiet companionship, one that didn't need words. But listen to this, it gets crazy. As the cub regained its strength, its wild nature began to show. One morning, the man woke to find his fishing supplies scattered across the floor, the bobcat pouncing gleefully on a tangle of line. "You little troublemaker," he muttered, but there was no anger in his voice. Instead, there was something he hadn't felt in years. Joy. Their bond deepened as the weeks turned into months. The man would take the cub with him to the riverbank, watching as it explored the world with cautious curiosity. It would chase after falling leaves, pounce on shadows, and every now and then it would glance back at him, as if seeking approval. "You've got the spirit," he'd say, his voice filled with pride. But that's not all. It wasn't just the man who changed. The bobcat, once a wild and wary creature, began to trust him completely. It would curl up on his lap by the fire, its soft purring filling the cabin. It would follow him around the village, earning curious glances from the neighbors. "Is that a bobcat?" one of them asked incredulously. The man just smiled. "Family," he replied simply. Their bond deepened as the weeks turned into months. The man would take the cub with him to the riverbank, watching as it explored the world with cautious curiosity. It would chase after falling leaves, pounce on shadows, and every now and then it would glance back at him, as if seeking approval. "You've got the spirit," he'd say, his voice filled with pride. One stormy night, the cub went missing. The man searched frantically, calling out into the howling wind. The thought of losing it, of being alone again, was unbearable. Hours passed before he found it, tangled in a thicket, its leg caught in a snare. His heart broke at the sight. "I've got you," he said, his voice shaking as he freed it. The cub, despite its pain, nuzzled against him, a silent assurance that their bond remained unbroken. Back at the cabin, the man tended to its wounds with the same care he'd shown on the riverbank all those months ago. "You're a fighter," he whispered, stroking its fur. "We're not giving up, not now." The storm raged outside, but inside, the warmth of their connection was unshakable. As time went on, the bobcat grew stronger, its sleek form a testament to its resilience. But listen to this. It wasn't just the bobcat that had changed. The man, once burdened by loss and loneliness, found himself looking forward to each day. The bobcat had given him a reason to wake up, to keep going. They were two souls who had saved each other, bound by a shared understanding of survival and second chances. The village children adored the bobcat, marveling at its grace and playfulness. "He's not just a bobcat," the man would tell them. "He's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's a spark worth holding on to." Years passed, and their story didn't remain confined to the village. News of the man and his rescued bobcat spread, captivating hearts around the world. Journalists visited the tiny cabin, sharing the tale of hope, resilience, and the unexpected bond between a grieving old man and a wild creature. Their story inspired millions, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple into something extraordinary. One night, as the man sat by the fire with the bobcat curled up beside him, he received a letter from a stranger. It read, "Your story reminded me to hold on, even when things felt impossible. Thank you." He held the letter in his weathered hands, tears glistening in his eyes as he looked down at the bobcat. "See, little one, you've done more than you'll ever know." And now, dear viewers, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What does this story mean to you? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible tales of hope and inspiration. Because sometimes, saving something small can save the world.